Financial Modeling, Topic 14, Futures Contracts, Section 5, Constructing Strip Hedges versus Stack and Roll Hedges. So a strip hedge is simply entering into futures contracts that actually line up with the maturities of the asset in which you want to buy or sell. So for example, if Hershey wants to lock into the price of cocoa for 10 tons per month for the next year, and assuming there are monthly contracts available, it could simply enter into 10 January contracts, 10 February contracts, 10 March contracts, and so on. So they can enter into a strip of forward contracts or futures contracts. All right, this is called a strip hedge, which is hedging a stream of obligations or purchases or sales by offsetting each with a futures contract matching the maturity and quantity. Now this is as opposed to a stack hedge. Now it seems strange at first. If Hershey wants to lock into the price of cocoa for 10 tons per month for the next year, it could enter into 120 contracts. Not over the 12 months, but could actually just buy 120 contracts with the shortest delivery date, the nearest maturity, because those tend to have the highest liquidity. Now this is called a stack hedge, stacking up all the maturities into the nearest or shortest delivery. Then what they're going to do is something called a stack and roll. If they choose to do a stack hedge of 120 contracts and say that January delivery, it would simply unwind all contracts, all 120 of them, prior to that first contract's maturity or expiration, then buy a new contract for, say, the February, buy a new 120 contracts for February. And then right before February matures, or February contract matures, they would sell them off and buy 120 contracts for March. This process is called rolling the futures, which means you're unwinding the expiring contract and entering into the next maturity. Now the benefit of this contract is that as long as prices increase across all maturity dates, you're going to profit based on that full 120 quantity from a price increase. So in some sense, it doesn't matter whether you've gotten contracts over 12 months or stacked them all up in the first month, because you're getting paid based on the full 120 contracts in this example. So let's do an example of a company that needs to purchase oil, and say the current spot price per barrel is $60 per barrel. And this firm is worried about price increases. Let's assume that we can simply use our no arbitrage cash and carry price and say that futures price is simply the spot price times 1 plus R plus my storage minus my convenience minus my lease. Let's assume away all those factors in convenience, storage, and lease, and let's just say that the futures price simply reflects the cost to carry the interest rate, which is 5%. In that case, the 1-year futures and forward price should be 5% higher than spot of 63, and the 2-year futures price should be 66.15. So what if in a strip hedge, this firm could buy a contract for the 1-year delivery at 63 and buy a contract for the 2-year delivery at 66.15. Now if they do that, let's assume they put on those two hedges, and then the worst case scenario happens to them. Immediately after putting on these two hedges, buying at 63 and 66 for 1 and 2-year delivery, prices of oil spike to $100 and stay there forever. Now the payoffs or the cost of their strip hedge, all right, their hedged cost of acquiring oil for the strip hedge is going to be the profit they make on this futures contract minus their spot purchase of the asset. So at the end of year 1, if the prices of oil go to $100, the spot and futures price of that oil in 1 year is going to be $100 for that 1-year maturity. So they're going to make ST minus F, that's $63, and then they're going to purchase oil for $100 in the spot market. So what they're going to basically do is take their $37 profit from the derivatives contract, buy their oil for $100, effectively locking into a $63 price of oil. And 2 years from now, they're going to unwind that second contract. Again, let's just make the easy assumption that oil prices stay at $100. So 2 years from now, oil selling for $100. That's my ST minus F. I'm going to make that profit about $44. I'm then going to buy oil in the spot market, and I'm going to lock into that should be 66.15. So if they do a strip hedge, they've locked into the price of oil. But what if, and here's actually, if you go to the spreadsheet, you'll see I set up a spreadsheet with all my trades. On 1/15/2019, I buy a 1-year contract and a 2-year contract. 1/15/2020, 1 year later, I sell. I'm sorry, I get out of my, I unwind my 1-year contract, and then in 2 years, I unwind my second contract, and what you see is I've locked into my $63 and $66 hedging cost, assuming I do unwinding. But let's do a stack hedge. What if they don't do this? What they do is day 0, today, they're going to buy 2 1-year contracts at $63. At the end of the year, they're going to sell those 2 contracts, unwind those 2 contracts by taking short positions. Now they're going to make $37 profit in that first contract, right? That's the same as they would on the strip hedge. And then they're going to buy their oil at $100, and they're going to effectively make they're going to cost them $63 to acquire oil for that 1-year contract. However, the second contract, they're also going to sell that contract, and they're just going to keep the $37 in a bank account. However, at the end of the first year, they've now sold off or unwound those first 2 contracts. They're then going to long the 1-year contract. And let's assume this firm doesn't need oil in year 3 and 4, make it easier. They're just going to take a 1 year, they're going to buy 1 year forward 1 year from now. So I'm going to call that F12. That's the 1 year forward 1 year from now. Now that forward price next year, assuming that the cost to carry stays at 5%, that futures price should be selling at 105. So again, it's a tough concept here. However, at time period 0, they entered into a contract to buy 2 barrels of oil for $63. 1 year later, oil selling for $100, so the 1 year forward or futures price 1 year from now should be 105. Now they went ahead and purchased their oil in the spot market using the first contract, and then just took the profit from that second contract. Now it's 2 years later. Let's assume oil prices stay at $100. Their ST minus F on that second contract, or that contract they bought a year earlier, they've actually lost $5 on it. But they went ahead and purchased that oil in spot markets, effectively paying 105 for oil 2 years from now. However, they had this $37 from the prior year. They invested it at the interest rate of 5%. They have $38.85 profit from the first year's contract. I add those 2 numbers together, they wind up being $66.15. I'm sorry, $66.15. That should be, again, $66.15. So it's an interesting example in that they could have done a strip hedge to lock into 63 and 66.15. However, by stacking them up into the first year, as long as the cost to carry remains at 5%, in other words, as long as that futures price that's from year 1 to 2 only has a 5% cost to carry, they effectively will lock into that strip hedge price. Now, what is the exposure for stack and roll? Their exposure is to the cost to carry 1 year from now. In other words, let me get rid of some of this scribbling here. 1 year from now, their only exposure is, what if the cost to carry now is 10% and they pay 110? Well, now they're going to have an increase in costs due to the increased cost to carry. This shows in Excel all the trades. Remember, this is my strip hedge to lock into 63 and 66.15. For a stack and roll, they're going to buy 2 contracts at 63 for 1 year delivery, at the end of the first year, they're going to unwind those two contracts at $100 and put on a new contract of $105, and then a year later, they're going to unwind that contract, that last contract, for $100, and shows that they have locked into 66.15. Why stack and roll? The easy answer is that contracts are unavailable or illiquid for that 2-year maturity. Or what if they just feel that that 2-year forward price is too high, or the cost to carry is too high? In that case, that view that cost to carry is too high, or that it doesn't equal the no-arb price, they just feel like they don't like that 2-year price, then they can just enter into the stack and roll and stack up in the 1-year contract. This is related to that third concept, why do a stack and roll. If you're a purchaser of an asset, you would put on a stack and roll if you feel the forward curve is going to flatten. In other words, if you're looking at a forward curve for 1-year and 2-year deliveries that look like this, and you feel that the curve should look like this, you feel that this is too high, what you could do is buy 2 of these contracts, and hopefully when the time comes to renew and get this 1-year contract, that new futures price will be lower and you'll earn some extra profits or reduce your costs by that flattening of the forward curve. So what you're hoping is a flattening of the yield curve, of the forward curve before putting on the new hedge. Now, just last thing we'll talk about, some closing out alternatives for futures contracts. You can hold contracts to maturity and take delivery, or receive the cash settlement. Or you can unwind futures by taking the opposite position in the same contract, and we talked a lot about that. A third option is you can exchange a futures for physical delivery. There are firms out there that will take your futures contract and effectively give you physical delivery of an actual commodity. And sometimes they're called EFPs, for exchange futures for physical delivery, or they're also called against actuals, or AAs. And basically you're just negotiating another contract to exchange your future or forward contract for the actual physical delivery at your specified location and quality and so on. So in this topic, we constructed strip hedges versus stack and roll hedges.